Hi, Gerald.
Hi, Boris.
Gerald, one question I have because we follow this, of course, very closely is your relation to Hungarian publicity. How do you feel if a country chooses somebody as a public enemy and then basically just tells stories which are not true and is really aggressive towards one single individual? How does that really feel?
I must admit, my first reaction was, this is a joke, this isn't serious. But when I then saw, and this was even more surreal, people discussing on Hungarian television, security experts, that discussing my life and how I was a security threat to Hungary, I realized that, well, not only is it not a joke, but it's really a red line is being crossed here. And that just gives us a really good sense of what's wrong with Hungary today. It's about enemies, and anybody who's not with Orban is an enemy. And civil society, which is critical, is not annoying, citizens who have a different opinion or annoying foreigners who are critical. It's part of a conspiracy to destroy the nation. It's a security threat. And that's, in Europe, in the EU 2020, that's crazy.
I can imagine Gerald sitting in Bregenzer Wald in Hittisau, looking into the woods, right, saying, I have tried so many things, now you bastards, politicians, I'm out. Because I can imagine that once, game is over, right? Because do you see results?
There is this story of Camus, right, of Sisyphus, who's rolling up the rock, and he says we have to imagine him happy, although the rock always comes down. He always fails. It never works. I sometimes felt this when I worked in Bosnia, in an international institution, many years ago. And we had crazy powers. In theory, this institution could impose a law by putting it on our website. It was the law in Bosnia. We could fire politicians. I was part of this colonial institution. It's strange to expect that a few people in a white building in the center of Sarajevo, a few foreigners, should be able to just write a law and then change the lives of all these people who are never asked. Democracy is about it being difficult for politicians to change things because we need to consult.
One of the problems I think we see in this whole migration discussion and in some other political issues too is that the image people create about an issue doesn't really tell us something about what we are actually facing. And you are talking about this in your book too, based on your findings, and how do we build counter images?
You say image, I would say story. So I give you an example, concrete one. I had a debate yesterday. I'm in this German commission on Fluchtursachen. In this debate, I realized a lot of experts in different fields believe this master myth, which is that we are facing a massive migration pressure from Africa. And I come across this all the time. I write about this in the book. Politicians create a fairy tale around this. Viktor Orban is the best. This image of all these African young men looking for jobs. They don't find jobs. Africa is poor. There are wars. So they will all then decide, they will be pressed to go north. And I said, listen, last year, 41,000 people was the total number of irregular crossings from North Africa to Europe. 41,000. 25 years ago, between 1999 and 2008, the average each year was also 42,000. It's not increased. A few hundred people every year climbing the fence of Spanish enclaves in Morocco. Dramatic images. They storm the fence. If you've seen these images in Ceuta and Melilla, hundreds at the same time, so that perhaps 50, hopefully for them, that's what they think, get across. This creates an image of a siege, an invasion. But if you look at the numbers, you realize that's not happening.
Aren't we a bit naive?
Well, that is what, first, I would always
assume the integration challenge. Yes. We fail, Gerald. We fail so much to have, we're not Canadians. We are Europeans, and we fail integrating people and to make them to real citizens. And on the other side, the majority population also feels kind of afraid. So we have to find new policies in this integration topic, because otherwise your narrative won't work because you will always sit in front of politicians who show you opinion polls.
Well, first of all, what you've just discussed has nothing to do with the borders.
Are you sure?
The people you're talking about
But
came
with
in
the
legally.
image of-
It's nothing to do with borders. The people of Turkish descent who are in Austria have been asked to come. They did not get into a
Long time
boat.
ago. Yeah.
Vienna, how many people who live in Vienna now are not born in Austria? It's a very high number. Is Vienna today a less secure, less just, less clean, less pleasant place than it was 50 years ago?
If we get a minister for justice who was born in Bosnia, this is a fantastic story. But the moment she is minister for justice, she is exposed to hate crime. You cannot imagine it. So something doesn't work.
But it's very clear what's happening is that just as the Irish, when they arrived in Boston, were not seen as white people. You know, when the Irish arrived, there's this great book, How the Irish Became White. Because Irish immigrants were seen as these Catholic, colored people. It's simply true that places that are successful are places that attract people from other parts of the world. They're not Asterix and Obelix grandchildren when you go into the metro in Paris. They look like they are from other parts of the world, but they are French. They did not arrive in boats at the border irregularly. It's not a failure of border control.
So you write about kind of how to create human borders, right? How to connect a border regime with kind of our human values. So where's the program? Kind of what do we have to do to make this possible?
We have perhaps 15 million refugees in the world in middle and poor income countries. We should have a system, a global system, that we can give them access to education, healthcare, and basic support where they are. And this was agreed by 181 countries at the UN General Assembly in 2018. A global refugee compact. Only 2 countries were against. The US of Donald Trump and the Hungary of Viktor Orban. If we combine that with a program of resettlement of Western countries having an orderly process, like Canada, 0.05% of the Canadian population are brought in through sponsorship. In Austria, there would be 4,000 people. That is in Oberösterreich, 800. In Vorarlberg, I had a debate 2 days ago, it would be each municipality 2 people a year. There will be people who want to do that. So we help them where they are. We bring some of them here in an orderly way. And we quickly return those after a fair procedure who don't need to come. And we have humane borders.
So this, I think, is the main message of your book, right?
Yes, it's possible.
You for sure followed the discussion about the conditionality mechanism of the EU budget and Hungary and Poland opposing it, right? How do you see this? Because I think this is a huge important step that this conditionality is in place.
But how much will it cut? 100 million? 200 million? Hungary and Poland get dozens of billions in the next 7 years. Then this proposal goes to the Council, the member states, which have to vote. If 2 big countries and a few smaller ones are against, it will never pass. But let's assume they agree, then it will certainly go to the court. What do we really need is something different. In Poland, there is an existential threat because the Polish government created a judicial system like in Venezuela. To stop this, we have one mechanism, but it needs to be backed up. And it's the European Court of Justice in Luxembourg. It will issue judgments. The trouble is, Poland is likely to ignore those judgments. It's already doing so. And then the EU falls apart. So what are we supposed to do? My recommendation was, and it still is, and I think we'll need to do it eventually. If a country does not respect the judgments of the European Court of Justice on the rule of law, we should cut all money until it does. That wouldn't help us with Hungary. I think Hungary, the problem might be misunderstood. We hear a lot about media, and we've talked about it, the media campaigns against enemies of the state, including myself. But the strange thing is in Hungary, the biggest television station in the country is owned by Germans. It's RTL. It's owned by your colleagues, the Bertelsmann Foundation. Why are they not having more investigative journalists? A lot of this is about a battle of institutions. Of course, the moment Hungary has a political prisoner, which it doesn't at the moment. I think in Poland we could have political prisoners soon. Then we discover that there's another instrument we're allowed to decay, which is the Council of Europe. It's supposed to rule on these issues. We need it for Poland. In the end, we need to have majorities of Hungarians and Poles on our side. We need to protect independence of courts. That's clear. We need to make sure that we can strengthen anti-corruption institutions like Olaf to investigate what happens with EU money. And we need a bit of courage.
So many things you say is, for us a kind of Arbeitsauftrag. And I think we have to question ourselves all the time. Do we really focus, right? Are we really on the relevant topics? And we have the freedom to do so as foundations, to really create answers and solutions and to lobby for them, right? We are not elected, so we cannot implement them, but we can lobby for them. I thank you very much for this call, Gerald. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And have a great time. Say hello to your family.